Some stories don't start with a scream or a dramatic moment. Sometimes they begin with something small, quiet. Like noticing that your wedding dress is missing and trying to convince yourself that it's not a big deal. It was a Thursday. I had just finished folding the laundry when I decided to reorganize the closet a bit. Nothing major, just shifting coats around, trying to make space for the summer clothes. That's when I reached for the back section and felt the hanger. Empty. I pulled it out, thinking maybe I'd put a coat there and forgotten, but no. It was the metal hanger where my wedding dress had always been. That specific hanger, the one with the soft padding and little pearl pins I'd added myself before the wedding. At first, I blinked slowly, trying to remember if I'd moved it. Had I taken it to my mom's house? Dropped it off for cleaning? Maybe I'd loaned it to someone? But as the minutes passed and my memory gave me nothing, my stomach started to tighten. Now, I'm not the kind of person who jumps to conclusions. Or at least, that's what I've trained myself to believe. Over the years, I learned how to talk myself out of things. You get so used to being labeled sensitive or paranoid that eventually, you just stop asking questions. So I stood there, looking at the gap in the closet, telling myself it wasn't worth starting an argument over. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe he'd moved it for some reason. But in my heart, I knew something was off. Still, I zipped the closet shut and walked away. I didn't bring it up over dinner. Didn't mention it while we watched TV that night. I kept quiet. Because sometimes silence feels safer than answers you're not ready to hear. And maybe that's the part that hurts the most. The way we teach ourselves to live with tiny heartbreaks. To smile through the unease. To ignore the knot in your chest just to keep the peace. If you've ever done that. If you've ever pretended not to notice something because the truth felt too heavy. Take a second. Like this video. Comment if you've ever swallowed your gut feeling just to avoid another "you're overreacting" talk. And if this already feels too close to home, subscribe. Because there's more coming, and you're not alone in this. That night, I laid in bed next to him while he scrolled through his phone. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the quiet buzz of notifications. Trying not to ask myself who was on the other end. We didn't talk much. We hadn't, for a while. And in that silence, the missing dress became more than just a garment. It became a symbol. Of something lost, something I couldn't name yet. But could feel slipping further away every day. I thought about asking. I rehearsed it in my head. Hey, do you know what happened to my dress? So simple. So casual. But I knew how it would go. He'd shrug. Act confused. Maybe even laugh. He was good at that. Turning my concerns into punchlines. So instead of asking, I smiled politely when he said goodnight. Turned off the light. And cried in the bathroom with the faucet running. Just in case. The next morning, he left early. Said something about an early meeting. Didn't kiss me goodbye. And I went back to the closet. I touched every hanger again, hoping I was wrong. But I wasn't. The dress was gone. And deep down, I already knew I'd never see it again. The next few days felt off. Nothing obvious, but you know when something shifts, even if you can't name it? He was lighter. More relaxed. humming in the kitchen, whistling in the car. He even brought home a bottle of wine one night, which we hadn't done in months. At first, I almost welcomed it. Maybe I was just imagining things. Maybe the dress would show up and I'd laugh at myself for being dramatic. But something inside me stayed still. Waiting. It happened on a Sunday afternoon. The kind of lazy day when laundry piles up and everyone's half-dressed and barefoot, moving through the house in slow motion. I remember I was in the laundry room, folding towels, when I heard laughter from upstairs, his laughter. It wasn't just a chuckle. It was the kind of deep, unguarded laugh I hadn't heard from him in years. It stopped me mid-fold. I walked out of the laundry room, holding one towel in my hand, and headed toward the stairs. I didn't even know why. I think my body moved before my brain did. The bedroom door was ajar. Not wide open, but enough. Enough for me to hear him clearly. "You're just not exciting anymore." At first, my mind refused to register it. That couldn't be what he said. Not to me. Not about me. But then I stepped closer, and that's when I saw her. At first, it was just a blur. The back of her head, the way she was standing. But then she turned, laughing. And I saw what she was wearing. My dress. My wedding dress. Not something like it. Not a replica. Mine. The same neckline. The same fabric. The same tiny stain at the hem from the wine he spilled during our first dance. She was spinning in front of the mirror, admiring herself, holding her hands against her waist like she was already picturing herself walking down the aisle. And he was sitting on the edge of the bed, watching her, not in shock, not in guilt, but with a soft, dazed smile. The kind of smile I hadn't seen from him in years. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I just stood there, watching them. And something inside me shifted. There's a moment in every betrayal when the pain freezes. When the emotion drains out and all that's left is clarity. I reached that moment in that doorway. I saw her holding the sides of my dress like it was hers to claim. I saw him resting his elbows on his knees like it was the most natural thing in the world to watch someone else step into memories we once shared. And the irony is, I wasn't angry at her. I didn't even feel anything toward her. All my focus was on him. He didn't just cheat. He didn't just lie. He took something sacred, something personal, and handed it to someone else like it meant nothing. That dress wasn't just a dress. It was my history. My promise. My hope. And he let her wear it like it was just another outfit. I backed away slowly, careful not to make a sound. My breath was caught somewhere between my chest and throat. But I didn't cry. I couldn't. When I got back downstairs, I sat in the kitchen for a long time. No phone in my hand. No tears. Just stillness. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about justice. It was about truth. And that truth had just unfolded in front of me. In lace and silk and stolen glances. They say you never really know how you'll react until it happens to you. I used to imagine all kinds of scenes in my head, screaming, throwing things, demanding explanations. But when the moment actually came, none of that happened. Instead, I went quiet. After I saw her in my dress and heard his voice, I didn't run into the room. I didn't cry in the hallway or collapse on the floor. I simply turned away, walked down the stairs, and sat in the kitchen like I was waiting for something that had no name. The silence was almost comforting. It wrapped around me like a coat, giving me space to think, to breathe, to keep myself from unraveling. I looked around the kitchen, the same kitchen where we had shared Sunday pancakes, birthday candles, late-night tea after long days. It didn't feel like mine anymore. I sat there for what must have been 10 minutes, maybe more, with my hands resting on the table, unmoving. And then I remembered something. Months earlier, after a fight we'd had about, well, I don't even remember what, it had been so small and yet so telling, I met with a lawyer. Not to file for anything. Not even to threaten him. I just needed to know that I had options. That I wasn't trapped. That if one day, things went too far, I wouldn't be caught unprepared. That meeting had left me with a black folder. Inside were papers I hadn't signed at the time. Later, after another moment of doubt, I had signed them quietly, just in case. And I had tucked them away, hoping I'd never have to see them again. But now, as I sat at the table with the weight of everything I'd just witnessed pressing down on my chest, I stood up slowly and walked to the drawer near the fridge. I didn't hesitate. I reached into the back, pulled out the folder, and opened it right there on the counter. Seeing my name, his name, the lawyer's notations, it didn't feel dramatic. It felt grounding. Like someone I used to be had prepared this version of me for what I wasn't ready to face. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel the urge to go back upstairs and make a scene. I just felt done. It was a strange calm, the kind that comes after a long storm, not because the sun came out, but because you stopped fighting the rain. About 20 minutes later, he came downstairs. I heard his steps before I saw him, casual and slow, like he had no idea anything had happened. He poured himself a drink, opened the fridge, and looked around like it was any other evening. Then he turned to me, gave a small smile, and asked if I wanted anything. I said nothing. Instead, I gently slid the folder across the counter toward him. At first, he didn't notice what it was. But when his eyes landed on the heading, my full name printed in bold, he froze. His hand, still holding a glass, stiffened slightly, and the color drained from his face. He looked up at me, confused, maybe scared, maybe still trying to decide whether to lie. And I just looked back. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't explain. I think that unnerved him more than if I had. Because silence, when it comes from clarity, not fear, is the most powerful sound in the room. He asked me if we could talk. I shook my head. I didn't want to hear whatever version of the story he was preparing. I didn't want to be convinced. I didn't want to be soothed. I just wanted it to end. So I picked up my bag, took my keys from the hook, and headed toward the door. He called my name once, quietly. Then again, louder, this time with panic creeping in. But I didn't turn around. Because I knew that if I did, I might hesitate. And I wasn't going to give him one more piece of me. Walking out that door wasn't dramatic. There was no suitcase, no storm behind me, no slamming of anything. Just keys in my hand, a folded folder left on the counter, and a silence that said everything I didn't. I didn't know where I was going yet. I hadn't planned that part. But what I did know, more clearly than anything, was that I wasn't staying. I got in the car, pulled out of the driveway, and drove without a destination. The city blurred past me, and for a while, I just kept driving, letting the quiet settle into the seat beside me. I didn't cry. I didn't play music. I didn't even call anyone. I just exhaled. There's something strange about freedom when it comes after a betrayal. It doesn't feel like a victory. It feels like waking up in a house that's no longer burning. Like you've survived something, but haven't yet figured out what that survival means. I pulled into a gas station, not because I needed fuel, but because I needed to pause. I sat in the parking lot, engine off, watching people go about their lives. And I realized the world hadn't stopped. No one could see what had just broken inside me. No one knew that a version of my life had just ended. That's the thing with heartbreak, it's invisible in public. I spent that night at a small hotel, one of those places with thin walls and soft yellow lights, the kind that don't ask too many questions at the front desk. I checked in with one bag and no explanation. In the quiet of that room, I opened the window and let the night air in. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, replaying everything. Not just what I saw, but all the signs before it. The little dismissals. The emotional distance. The way he started looking past me instead of at me. It didn't start with the dress. That was just the moment it became visible. I think the grief hit me in pieces, first for the marriage, then for the version of myself that stayed too long, and finally for the woman who still wanted to believe he could change. But that grief didn't come with tears. It came with stillness. With a sort of quiet mourning for the years I gave, and for the parts of myself I lost along the way. The next morning, I called my lawyer. Told her to proceed. Then I called my mother. I told her I needed a few days before I explained everything, but that I was okay. I wasn't sure if that was true yet. But I wanted it to be. In the days that followed, he texted, called, sent long emails filled with explanations, half apologies, and desperate attempts to talk things through. But I didn't respond. Because there was nothing left to talk about. There was no conversation that could undo what I saw. Or unhear the words he thought I'd never hear. And honestly, there was no version of love I wanted that included being treated like I was a placeholder for someone else's fantasy. Eventually, the messages slowed down. And then stopped. I started building something new. Not just a life, but a sense of self that wasn't tied to being someone's wife. I went back to doing things alone, drinking coffee in silence, walking at sunset without telling anyone where I was going, remembering what it felt like to belong only to myself. And it was slow. Some days still hurt. But there was peace in that pain, because at least it was honest. I didn't have to wonder anymore. I didn't have to check closets or question silences. I could just be. And if you've made it this far, if any part of this story felt like a reflection of your own, thank you. Thank you for staying. Thank you for listening to something so quiet and so raw. If this reminded you of your own strength, leave a comment. If you've ever had to walk away, not because you stopped loving someone, but because they stopped honoring your love, I see you. And if you need to hear more stories that tell the truth behind the silence, subscribe. Because healing isn't loud. It's quiet. And you don't have to do it alone.